Thank you so much for coming to our studios, Mr. Odermatt. It's been
Morning,
11
Malika.
years. Good morning. It's been 11 years, yet the memories are fresh. What are your memories from that day? Because I know you coordinated the rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero.
Well, I think my first memories and reflections for today are with the families. And right now, their names are being read of the victims from 9/11. So my first thoughts are with them. And, you know, to us, it's a very public tragedy, but to them, it's very personal. And, you know, reflecting on that day, you know, it was a day just like today, a very beautiful day in New York, but yet in a very beautiful day on 9/11, 11 years ago.
That's right.
And it was a normal day for me. I went into the Office of Emergency Management, and ironically, it was a day where we were preparing for a biological drill for an attack against New York City to do an exercise, which was really part of a normal day for us, and we were planning this event. And then the first plane struck the North Tower.
Around these times, actually,
Right,
the second
right.
one, right?
Just around this time, yeah.
And you said you think about the families. Yes, it is a public tragedy. And in terms of the planning, can you tell us about the drill, the attack on New York City? What happened? How did you oversee everything?
Yeah. Well, I didn't oversee everything. It was obviously an enormous amount of leadership by Mayor Giuliani at the time, and really from everybody who was involved. A spirit of cooperation that really was unparalleled and unsurpassed at the time. But I think the most important point is to really talk about the pre-planning and the work that goes into, you know, recovering from this type of event, similar to what, you know, my current role is at Citigroup, and the type of work that goes into bringing all of these people together to come up with one unified response. And that type of planning, Malika, takes years and years and years, which was built up, you know, in the Office of Emergency Management at the time, and involves every type of agency that has a certain responsibility during a crisis for disaster and recovery and mitigation. Once this occurred, and once the attacks occurred, you bring a controlled situation from really chaos. And when this occurred, you know, having to relocate the command center from 7 World Trade, first to the police academy and then to a different location, really meant that the work put in prior to that and all the planning had to come together. And being able to move operations from one place to another place and then sustaining those operations ultimately to come up with a good recovery effort.
This not only took an amazing planning, but also leadership skills that we all witnessed.
Yeah.
And how did it come together? Can you tell us about the leadership that you showed, that Giuliani showed, and what do you remember from those?
Yeah, I guess my most vivid memory, you know, is really seeing the mayor that day in, you know, full of soot and covered up, but at the same time exacting a level of calmness which really transcended upon the leadership of, you know, the government at the time. And then, you know, taking that, when you speak about leadership, taking that and really translating that into actionables and operationalizing the recovery effort. You know, making decisions, you know, you don't necessarily make decisions on the fly. These are things, as you said, that are practiced and that, you know, come along with tabletop drills and planning. But I think the most important part is really going from a mode of, let's call it the 4 R's, you know, reacting to an event, responding to an event, recovering from an event, and then, of course, resuming operations. All of these things were done, you know, in advance for other types of events. Surely nobody could have predicted that, you know, a plane would have hit the tower or this was the type of event, but all of those pre-planning things come out while the event occurs, and then the actions that you would take are really come as a natural part of the disaster recovery. And then finally, when you talk about leadership, you talk about all the people that were involved in this. You know, Richie Shearer, you know, who passed away this year, was the commissioner at the time, and bringing the operations, you know, from the police academy into the professionals at the police department, and of course being at One Police Plaza later on that night, really showed the cooperative efforts, both, you know, in the private sector and the public sector, because that's where it really began to evolve into this cooperative effort of recovery. And those two things have really progressed throughout the years, the relationship between the public and private sectors and how they interact together, and now with the government even more, and how they interact together to resolve and mitigate crisis events.
It's well put. And a lot changed. I mean, being there and watching it, and also being in Wall Street. Myself, I lived here for so long, but since that day, our daily lives changed. The financial world changed, the global world changed, our attitudes changed. But in your eyes, what has changed since then? What are the most important things in your eyes that you feel like changed in our lives?
Malika, I think that there's been a fundamental shift in the way we respond to crisis events. And I'll give you an example. When I was the commissioner for the Office of Emergency Management, we took some of the lessons learned from 9/11 and we created a program called the Corporate Emergency Access System that lets businesses into areas where there would normally be police boundaries so they can get in and resume operations. And I think major financial institutions, such as my company, Citigroup, now have really taken a step forward in terms of how they plan and respond to crisis events by creating offices of emergency management and having precise leadership and direction and control during emergencies. But I think more importantly, the other shift that has occurred is building in resilient environments.
Yes.
Resiliency in three ways, right? One is preparing their people and having operations, split operations, and operations that can function outside their primary environments, and having redundant technological environments, and then of course having leadership and direction and control by establishing these types of protocols that interact not only with the private sector and intercompany, but also interacting with the public sector and being involved in information sharing and things of that nature.
And that was I guess, the most important thing. We came to the end of our conversation, but thank you so much for giving
You're welcome.
a valuable oversight into what happened and what's going on and how we're preventing, and with your help and with of course, many other officials in both public and private groups' help. Thank you for coming to our studios.
Thank you.